Good afternoon. My name is Hanne Beirens, and I'm the Associate Director at MPI Europe. Welcome, everyone, to the call Asylum Reception in the European Union, a flexible model for the future. First of all, I would like to refer to some housekeeping notes. I would like to remind everyone that the audio from the webinar will be on our website later today for you to consult. The related report, Getting the Balance Right, Strengthening Asylum Reception Capacity at National and EU Levels by Michael Kegels, is available on our website. And should you have any technical problems during the webinar, please email events@migrationpolicy.org or call 202-266-1929. If you have problems hearing via the web, please dial in using the call information sent to you via email. We will have a written Q&A section at the end of the call. There will be no voice Q&A, so please type any questions you may have into the Q&A or chat box on the right side of your screen and send to the host. Or you could also email to events@migrationpolicy.org or tweet your question to @migrationpolicy or #MPIDiscuss. The presenters for today are Michael Kegels, who's the Director of Operational Services at Fedasil, Belgium, Jamil Addou, who at the European Asylum Support Office is the coordinator of the Quality Division within the Center for Training, Quality and Expertise. Finally, we have also Karoline Preisser, who's a legal expert for the Department for Basic and Federal Care at the Federal Ministry of the Interior in Austria. We will now start the webinar. With the current refugee crisis, the reception system of several EU member states have been put under significant pressure. Some reception authorities were simply overwhelmed with the large numbers on their doorstep, with stark images of children and their families sleeping rough and living in dire circumstances as a result. But for nearly all member states located along the migration routes, it has been all hands on deck to cope with this ongoing influx and to provide reception and material assistance to all those arriving and seeking protection. This paper by Michael Kegels could not have come at a more pertinent time, as it identifies the range of challenges that reception systems face, even without these exceptional circumstances, and explores the steps that reception systems can take to address these. As Michael Kegels rightly points out, it is a misconception that there may be times that all is quiet on the reception front. The number of asylum seekers requiring accommodation may change from one year to the next, but also from 1 week to the next. As a result, one of the key challenges for the authorities responsible for designing and managing reception facilities is flexibility. In Michael Kegels' paper, we see how EU member states have adopted different approaches to pursue this very goal. For example, by using buffer capacity, which in its simplest form is maintaining empty rooms or dormitories. Others have signed contracts with service providers who agree to provide X number of extra places within a given set of time. Still, other member states have been given a green light to shift between government budgets without having to pass by the Parliament in case of a reception crisis. And this brings us to the next challenge. Ensuring a flexible reception system costs money. In general, reception is a very costly post in the asylum system. At a time where many EU governments have to cut down on their public spending, also the costs of reception systems are under scrutiny. And so the dilemma arises: do we maintain empty rooms, allowing us to accommodate those who may arrive next week, or do we save the cost now, with a potential risk that the search for last-minute accommodation may actually turn out to be more costly? Hotels or the use of military barracks brings us to the third challenge that reception authorities have to tackle, and that's the one of quality. Asylum seekers without access to clean water or a roof above their head illustrate how some EU member states have struggled to provide even the most basic entitlements of asylum seekers. The Reception Conditions Directive is the EU legislative instrument that lays down the minimum standards that all EU member states should respect. In sum, maintaining quality standards when faced with a sudden influx and within a context of financial austerity are the triple challenges that reception systems have to deal with. Michael Kegels' paper goes on to analyze steps that can be taken within the reception organization to pursue this, such as risk assessment, but also designing a system of flexible budgets, flexible deployment of staff, plus a commitment at the management level to ensure that in times of downsizing, valuable assets such as knowledge gained and expert personnel are not lost. Next to these, what we could call internal measures, the paper also points out that the reception organization is not an isolated actor. Indeed, it's a fundamental part of an asylum chain consisting of other authorities, agencies, and non-governmental actors. External policies and conditions affect the number of asylum seekers entering, staying, and leaving the reception system. For example, the number of caseworkers to review applications for asylum will affect the time that asylum seekers spend in reception centers. And similarly, efforts to ensure that those granted asylum find new housing or that those rejected are swiftly returned will affect the opening up of spaces in reception facilities. As such, coordination across the asylum chain is crucial for a strong reception system and may come in the form of joint task forces or alike. We now turn to Michael to shed further light on this. On the basis of the concepts and models you have developed in the paper, such as the concept of the asylum chain and the triangle of quality, flexibility, and efficiency, what observations do you make regarding Belgium's response to the more recent pressure and influx in the country? And in addition, do you see any notable differences with how other member states have responded to the crisis in their country?
Okay, thank you, Hanne. Welcome, everybody. Michael Kegels here online. I want to share with you a little some of the concepts we used in Belgium, trying to face the high influx we encountered last year. Let me first of all try to develop a little bit how we tried to be prepared, what kind of contingency plan we had, what the situation as was. Well, there was a contingency plan, and it was based on three phases. We had a structural capacity of about 16,000 places. On top of that, we had buffer capacity of about 2,500 places. And in the third phase, we wanted to work with outsourcing via public tendering. And with developing that model, we really thought that Fedasil, namely the organization in Belgium responsible for the housing of asylum seekers, was prepared to face a potential reception crisis and to keep the triangle, and notably the three elements that Hanne described, flexibility, quality, and efficiency, that we could keep them in balance. Notably, we thought we would be flexible because we could quickly respond to a new influx. The activation time of the buffer was about 2 weeks. We thought we could handle pressure as we encountered pressure in previous crises. In the previous crisis, 2008, 2012, we got about 500 extra people entering our system a month. And so with this system, we would have been able to cope with an extra influx for about 4 to 5 months. And with the third phase we had in our system, namely the outsourcing, we thought we had an unlimited source of potential extra places by appealing to private sector or other NGOs or other organizations, and the buffer places were there to make the bridge to those third phase. So we made a hybrid system with own places, buffer capacity, and outsourcing to new partners, which made the system flexible. We thought, which made the system qualitative, because the basic idea was to have and to keep the quality stable, since buffer capacity and outsourcing was on the basis of normal reception standards. And the system should have been efficient also, namely the cost of the buffer places was about 3% of the budget of the agency to have there, to keep in place a system which should allow us to respond quickly. Now that was how we designed it. Now, what really happened was that we normally had an influx of about 1,000 new residents a month in our system, and in a period of about 2 months that grew over 6,000 a month. Our capacity rose in 6 months from 16,000 to 36,000 places, and our occupancy rate went from 76% until 97%. So what did we do? How did we respond? And I refer a little bit to the terms I use also in the report. We took some internal measures, and as was being said in the introduction, these are measures to be taken within the organization. So at first we activated the model we designed, the model that was based on about 500 extra a month, and we tried to improve the performance of the reception network. We raised the occupancy rate. We activated the buffer capacity, which should have lasted, as I said, for 4 to 5 months, but which was gone in 4 weeks. And we started an urgent procedure for public tendering, where normal procedure was about 6 months. We tried to do it in 6 weeks. On top of that, we took extraordinary measures. We got support from the army, from defense, where we got barracks, warehouses, logistics. We got support from civil protection. There was a creation of a whole capacity of new reception places via buildings, fields, camping sites, youth hostels, vacation parks. And there was a lot of flexibility demanded from all departments. To give some insights on that, every hour a new staff member was recruited. We opened every 3 days a new center. We were parallel working on the opening of 12 to 15 new reception centers. So it not only put a lot of pressure on the operational side of the agency, but also all the other departments of the agency really had to be flexible and had to respond as fast as all the other departments to the crisis we were faced with. Now, not only we took measures within the agency, but we also tried to develop measures concerning the other stakeholders and to reinforce, as I call it, the chain, which are the asylum agencies, and where we really would try to look at reinforcing the case handling, the outflow of the system, and see if there were measures could be taken on the field of the coordination, for example. So there was a coordinating body, it's called a task force, which was being created under the presidency of the Secretary of State. There was a coordination with police, security of state, the regions. There was extra staff hired for the asylum agencies to speed up procedure. Measures to reinforce the outflow by facilitating recognized asylum seekers to leave the system. We started discussions, and we ended also these discussions on a compulsory repartition plan for the local municipalities, elements that also exist in other countries. Now, what were the problems we encountered is that we weren't prepared for the influx. So we were prepared for a certain influx, 500 a month, but we had to improvise on the spot. And this means also that the organization as such was not prepared. If you look at the internal control element I raised in the paper, this was not completely done, which means that some services and most of the services within the agency were not prepared to respond to this kind of demand. But being too prepared would have had also a very huge cost to have 5, 6, 7, 8,000 places in buffer capacity would have had a too high cost to be able to fend that towards the government. Already now demands are coming from the government to come with plans to reduce capacity because there is a pressure from budget because now for a month and a half our occupancy rates are going down. Parallel with managing the high influx, there arose some link problems, radicalism, conflicts, press, public opinion, which also put a lot of pressure on the agency. Quality, which we thought within the model we could have kept stable, we had to let that drop, and the efficiency was under pressure because of the high demand on the flexibility side, which means that we think we paid perhaps a too high price to some private sector companies because we were under such high pressure. We didn't have enough operational partners to get the job done. At a certain point, we had more than enough places and sites, but we didn't have enough partners to get the job done. The political decision process via the Council of Ministers also had an impact on flexibility. And by launching our public tender too fast, we didn't get the right offers, price, or quality, which also put pressure on quality and the flexibility. So now we're very quickly, 2 months ago, we were creating capacity. Now we are discussing plans to reduce capacity. And one of the main lessons learned for us is how to get that triangle back into balance and get a more stable triangle for the future. So this means that the question now we really are searching for an answer to is how to ensure that our organization, our agency, can cope better with the future crisis, with keeping quality stable and costs low. So we're now trying to develop new concepts of buffer places at a far lower cost than we paid before, and trying to keep that quality high. And second of all is our measures to upgrade the flexibility of the agency by defining crucial processes and rendering them more flexible so we can respond more swiftly. And third of all, measures to reinforce the chain. Those are the three big issues we're now working on to see if there are any lessons we can pull from this crisis. I want to end my intervention here, and back to you, Hanne.
Thank you, Michael. That was interesting. We now turn to Karoline, where we'd also would like her to reflect on how the Austrian reception system has approached this triple objectives of quality, efficiency, and flexibility, and if there's sufficient coordination between the actors in Austria affecting the maximal or optimal use of the reception capacity there.
Thank you, Hanne, for this question. I would also like to say hello from my side from Austria. And, well, first of all, to your first question regarding the balance in Austria, in the Austrian reception system between efficiency, quality, and flexibility, I would maybe start to introduce a little the system we are working in. Since Austria is a federal state and with federal provinces and the federal state working together, especially in the reception field, we have a shared responsibility between federal state on the one hand, handling especially the first phase of the reception system, so the main intake into the system, and first, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, ideally. And then we have transfers into the federal provinces. We have 9 in Austria, and those provinces are handling the second phase of the reception system. So the applicants usually stay for the most time of their while their applications are handled within the responsibility of the federal provinces. And though this system makes it sometimes a little difficult to be flexible, on the other hand, it allows us to have different approaches also on the 2 different levels. So, for example, I'm working on the federal side for the federal ministry, and since we are responsible for the first phase of the reception system, we have our focus on larger facilities, on the intake, on the first information. So we try to focus on larger facilities, which allows us also to look for buffer capacities in times of less influx, and to build on this. And within our system, we would be the partners responsible for the emergency acting, let's say, and our partners in the provinces are more the ones for the stable phase, who try to build smaller facilities with a focus on the long-term stay, with a focus on quality, on which does not mean that we don't focus on quality, but I mean on a more stable basis, on a long-term basis. On the federal level, we especially gained that flexibility through a framework agreement after a European tender procedure in 2012. And since then, we have a private operator that provides most of the reception conditions and benefits, including social care, information, food, clothing, etc. And this led to a flexible management in the centers, especially also when it comes to human resources that would have never been possible only within the public system. With this private partner, we were really able to gain a lot of flexibility in that sense. On the other hand, Michael also mentioned in his paper that this sometimes or is often related to the risk of losing the control over the quality of provision of these services. And we try to tackle this problem also by having the management still in our hands. So all our federal reception centers are actually run by our staff. So the head of the reception center is always an Austrian official, but then the actual social workers, the actual granting of reception conditions, the work is done by our private operator. Well, and the third angle of the triangle of this, to keep the balance is of course the efficiency part, which always is one of the biggest problems, since we do not have a flexible budget as some of our partners on the European level, and this is, I would say, at the moment also the largest problem when it comes also to the flexibility part again, because on the one hand we really try to react swiftly, but then it always depends often also on a legal interaction, and we have to change the law, the budget law. But this is something that won't change very soon, I am afraid. When it comes to the coordination part, I think we have we've made some progress, and that was one of the big lessons learned during the last months. On the one hand, we always had a good coordination between the departments within the Ministry of Interior. So there, of course, we had, maybe that was one of the positive sides of being based in the ministry. So we have easy access to information when it comes to our partners in the police force, and also to the office who is handling the asylum procedures. But then when it came to this large influx in spring and summer last year, we tried to build up additional ad hoc task forces. We were in constant contact with all the stakeholders, also outside of the ministry, of course, with main NGOs, with the provinces, to really get the information there as soon as possible. And it would not have been we would not have been able to do whatever to build up all that capacity, also like emergency capacity, especially when it came to the phenomenon of transiting persons in late summer last year without this enhanced and enforced coordination. And what we also did, which was like one of the effects also for a long-term cooperation between the partners, was to build up a coordination unit, which really where all the information on capacity is coming in from the provinces, from all stakeholders within the reception systems, to really have an overview, and always, like at all times of the day, an overview about the capacities, and also to ensure that those capacities are used in the most effective and swiftest manner possible, let's say. And I think, so for the time being, also to make sure that we have time for questions later on, I would like to stop for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Karoline. That was a very interesting insight also in the Austrian system, and how you're also tackling this triangle of efficiency and quality and flexibility. We now turn to Jamil, and we would also like to ask him, via the practical cooperation work that is conducted by EASO in the field of reception, have you identified key aspects that help to achieve all the mentioned goals?
Yes, thank you very much, Hanne, and hello to all. Yes, I mean, we heard very clearly from the two examples from Michael and Karoline that reception systems across the EU are characterized by very diverse setups and present very diverse particularities. So, for instance, just to give you a very general overview, but for instance, we have in some member states centralized systems, and in some other member states we've got decentralized or federal systems, such as the one we just heard in Austria. In some member states we have independent authorities in charge of reception. In some other member states we have different authorities or different ministries responsible for reception. It could be interior, justice, labor, and so on. Another example is that in some member states the authorities involve third actors, such as NGOs or the private sector, in the provision of material reception conditions, when in some other member states it's all provided by the reception authority itself. So as we can see, there's a huge diversity of practices and setup, but the recent influx from last year showed that there are common challenges, of course, across the EU. It was very clear that at EU level there's a lack of sufficient and adequate reception capacity. There's a limited capacity to maintain quality in terms of influx. We heard a very interesting example from Michael just before. And this is even more visible in terms of applicants with special needs. And there are also challenges in terms of managing public opinion as well. This is an important factor and not always mentioned. Of course, there's no such thing as one perfect reception system. But what we have seen here in EASO through our work and our mapping of member state practices in relation to reception is that there are several key aspects that can contribute in the different systems to a successful general management of a system, meaning a flexible, high quality and efficient system. So we have identified 10 key aspects that could contribute to this goal. The first one is maintaining clearly assigned roles and responsibilities. So it doesn't matter whether the system is actually centralized or decentralized. It helps if all actors involved know clearly what their responsibilities are, and it also helps if there is clearly one authority in the lead. But that doesn't mean that it should stop the authorities from involving additional actors. Quite the contrary, because involving additional actors can help to better cater for the needs or the special needs of applicants, such as families or victims of sexual gender-based violence, children, and so forth. It seems that most member states in the EU have chosen for one reception authority, the model with one reception authority, which coordinates several actors, rather than several authorities who each have a mandate for a specific category of applicants. The second aspect, as I said, is the addition of external actors or private actors, third parties, so whether they are public actors, private actors, NGOs, and this is, we have seen in many member states that it actually brings added value in terms to dealing with applicants with special needs. A very practical thing that with huge practical implications in the field is the existence of a centralized database. It's very important that the information is actually centralized and linked to the national asylum database in case it's a different one. So all actors involved with clearly defined access rights, of course, have access to a better case management system. And this is a growing trend. More and more member states are realizing the need for enhanced information systems. Of course, another very important factor is the fact of ensuring constant quality. So that goes through training, of course, training of staff, but also through the existence of guidance, of monitoring systems, control systems. And for this to be efficient and meaningful, you need to use clear indicators that would cover several aspects of the reception system. So from infrastructure, security and safety, hygiene, sanitation, social aspects, and so on. And it's important that all those indicators are applied and checked controls within reception structures. We have seen that a number of EU member states have developed very comprehensive training camps using different types of training methodologies for their staff, including specific training on the needs of children, whether they are unaccompanied or accompanied, or survivors of violence and torture. Another factor is the early provision of information. It's very important that applicants are informed as soon as possible about the reception conditions, the benefits, and the obligations. So it depends, the timeline upon which information is delivered in the different member states depends. However, it seems that in many cases, information is usually provided upon the making of the application, of the asylum application. So that is at the moment when the applicant expresses the wish to apply for asylum. And that happens usually before the formal or administrative lodging of the application. And this can be done through, of course, a variety of channels and means, whether they are, we are speaking of oral information, written information, leaflets, posters, videos, etc. It is very important as well that the reception system considers individual aspects, and that is, for instance, very important when assigning area of residence. Because many member states have what we call dispersal systems for applicants, and this is very legitimate because there are reasons of such as efficiency of processing, managing the housing capacity, and so on. However, it is very important that when dispersing applicants throughout reception centers or throughout the territory, that aspects such as family ties or access to specific services for applicants, for instance, schooling for children, is also taken into account. Another aspect, and we are closing down on the list, is the efficient provision of material reception conditions. So that includes housing, financial allowances, healthcare, education, and so on. So we have seen that actually a relatively small group of member states resort to private housing in addition to the accommodation centers. However, we have seen that small or private housing arrangements can usually better cater for applicants with special needs, so families, women, for instance. And they also present more potential to foster the autonomy of applicants as well as their integration in local communities. So it's a very important factor for integration as well. Of course, most EU member states, if not all, consider individual factors when they are providing financial allowances, so they take into account the age, the family situation, the special needs, and so on. But it's also important that because it allows for some form of review of a decision to limit or withdraw reception conditions in specific cases. We have seen that, practically speaking, most member states actually do not use vouchers for provisional reception conditions, and that is because of the high bureaucratic burden involved in using such a system. So most member states use a combination of in-kind provision and cash provision, depending on the type of the reception structure. But further to material reception conditions, it's of course very important to maintain a high quality in the provision of non-material reception conditions. So, for instance, it was confirmed that actually most EU member states provide health care to all applicants at the same level of nationals, which is extremely important. And actually, some member states go even beyond that and provide additional support to applicants when special needs are identified. It's also important that education is ensured through the state system, and this is, of course, for child protection considerations, but also for long-term solutions. And this includes as well sometimes additional support such as language classes and preparatory classes to ensure that the access to the national education system is smooth and efficient. When it comes to access to employment or vocational training, we have seen, and we have seen a few very good examples. In some member states, we have seen that access to the labor market is offered within usually 1 month for applicants who have lodged their application for international protection, and that is conditional, for instance, in one member state, on establishing the identity. So basically, if you apply for asylum, if your identity is clear and established, then within 1 month you will be allowed to work, and this is, of course, extremely interesting. And last but not least, and then again linking back to Michael's presentation, that's the crucial importance of contingency plans. We have seen in light of the recent or the ongoing crisis, I must say, that the member states who had already contingency plans, and that's including buffer capacity for reception, seem to have comparatively less challenges in coping with the increased influx of applicants when the ones without specific plans seem to face bigger challenges. But I've spoke for a very long time, so I will leave it here for now. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Jamil, for this overview of a range of measures that reception systems could take and what trends are currently observed across the EU. We will now turn to the second theme of this webinar, and that looks into more the European cooperation. So Michael Kegels' paper also makes a clear case for this if quality, flexibility and cost efficiency within and across EU member states is to improve and be further harmonized. Refugee and migration movements are transnational phenomena, which, as many other transnational phenomena affecting EU member states, requires a transnational response. And the current refugee crisis has made this painfully clear, showing the inefficiencies and lowering of standards as each member state scrambles to deal with a large number of persons on their doorstep. We've had member states who de facto were competing with one another to buy containers to temporarily house asylum seekers back in the autumn of 2015. Plus, while some EU member states had to arrange for thousands of extra places and 10,000 of extra places, other EU member states closed down unused capacity. And the figure 4 in Michael Kegels' paper captures this really well and shows that this is an observation that already preceded the current crisis. For example, in the period 2008 to 2012, the Netherlands downsized its capacity in response to a fall, while on the other side of the border, Belgium increased capacity in order to respond to a big influx, with still thousands of people living on the streets as a result. But it's also clear that a solitary move of a member state can have a huge knock-on effect on other member states. Hungary's decision to build fences on its border rerouted the migration flow into Slovenia, which in just a matter of hours or days had to set up a system capable of receiving and providing assistance to 10,000 coming into their territory. So it's against this background that the paper also reflects on the degree to which practical cooperation between member states and with EU actors such as the EASO or the EPRA network has already and could in the future strengthen and support national reception systems, but also ensure efficiency and better quality across member states. The existing toolbox available is already large. AMIF funding, as well as other measures set up and run by EASO, which Jamil will tell us more about. It will be interesting to hear what other mechanisms the future may hold, such as an early warning mechanisms or forecasting and other software programs for contingency planning that the EASO could help to support. But there's also the pertinent question if we can actually usefully move forward and significantly increase our capacity to respond to transnational migration crisis in the EU without a mechanism that allows for logical, coherent and an integrated approach. The migration chain that Michael usefully refers to in the national context as impacting on the reception system is equally relevant at the EU level. The actions of the AMIF, the ASO, Frontex and others influence one another, and hence coordination between those actors in line with an overarching strategy is therefore key. So with this second theme, we now turn to Karoline, where we ask her to reflect on some lessons learned from the cooperation between Austria and Slovakia in this area.
Thank you, Hanne. Yeah, for our listeners, maybe as an introductional remark, Austria and Slovakia have been cooperating in the field of reception since July last year. There was an agreement signed between those two countries for a facility in Gabčíkovo. It's close to the Austrian and Hungarian-Slovakian border. It is an existing facility where it was initially was a university and later on has already been used by Slovakia as a reception center, but in the recent years it was unused. And since Austria had been facing and still is facing for a certain extent a crisis, but especially last year it was we were facing an immense influx, and we're trying to get or increase our capacity as fast as possible. There was this cooperation started, and since September 2015, we have a federal reception center on Slovakian soil, let's say, housing up to 500 Austrian asylum applicants. For me, personally, I've been there, or involved in this project from the start on. Let's say, for me, the biggest lesson learned is that it actually works, that it actually can be done, because during the last years on a European level, in different forums, we have been discussing between experts and practitioners, could cooperation, especially in the reception field, be possible on a European level, in a bilateral level. And most of my colleagues have said, well, how could it be? I mean, there have been projects when the procedure was concerned, but there has never been done anything similar in the reception field, and lots of obstacles were mentioned, also especially legal ones. And we all were a little skeptical, and then we saw, okay, when the two partners really want to make it happen, it is actually possible. I mean, there have been some practical obstacles, like, for example, how healthcare could be provided and on the same level in Austria as in Slovakia, and how can we do it. But in the end, it is a very, very successful project. It's still ongoing, and there have been no problems at all. The cooperation between Slovakia and Austria is very, very positive and very open, and communication is have been no problems in that. And what I do feel is that you have to be flexible, you have to be open to new ideas in a way, and then I'm sure we can find other ways of cooperation on a European level, also within the existing realities, within the existing system. And it has not to be done in a certain way. For example, in our project at the moment, the facility itself and the food is provided by the Slovakian partner, for example. The social care, healthcare is provided by Austria, for example. So, I mean, you can really cooperate in different ways, and for us, it was the real help was to have a facility of 500 persons, which is for within our system a relatively big entity, a relatively big facility, and it was actually not really possible to find comparative large facilities within such a short time in Austria at that point. So I think it is really a real success story, and I hope that we can share with our partners on a European level our experiences and other experiences and I'm sure there is a lot to be done and a lot of potential, let's say, for cooperation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Karoline, for this encouraging example of collaboration between member states in the field of reception. We now turn to Jamil to ask also the question, what could EASO do to pursue greater cooperation at the EU level in terms of reception systems that are actually able to deal with fluctuating numbers and at the same time pursue quality?
Yes, thank you, Hanne. Actually, there are a different range of actions that are already being conducted by EASO. For instance, we have recently created a network of reception authorities, so that's in line with the EU agenda on migration that was initiated in May 2015. So really the idea of the network is to step up cooperation on reception, and we have had an excellent response from national authorities, because we have currently about 28 national authorities in the network. And we had an inaugural meeting in March this year. And while there is no doubt that the already existing networks, such as EPRA and others, have paved the way, and they clearly added value to the cooperation in the field of reception, the response to the creation of the EASO network of reception authorities clearly shows that there's a need for even further cooperation and coordination even more at EU level. So the network in itself has several objectives, and to some extent we are still working out with the members of the network the exact and final scope of our activities. But currently we can already say that, of course, the network is there to provide for a forum, of course, for exchange of information and good practices between member states. That's quite expected from the network. But the idea is as well to collect evidence-based inputs, so we could feed back information from the ground, from the different national authorities to the policy level. And it's in those days where there are discussions around the future of ASEAN, it's extremely important to have a bottom-up approach as well to policy making. Of course, we would rely on the network to provide input to the EASO practical cooperation activities in the field of reception, and we have a number of projects specifically on reception that I will go into. It also enables to support timely data collection on reception. It's important to know what is the current reception capacity in all member states, also to have a bigger picture. And you were mentioning early warning earlier on, and as part of a current Dublin regulation, it has a role for maintaining a early warning and preparedness system, whereby it measures the pressure on the system in terms of influx, but also in terms of capacity of the system. And of course, reception is a key aspect in measuring the capacity of member states to deal with specific inflows. And of course, one very important aspect of it is to pool expertise and capacity on reception. And for instance, to have even a bigger role for our what we call our asylum support teams, so the teams of member state experts that we deploy to member states facing particular pressure, so as for instance currently in Greece. And it's very important that the network facilitates the identification of the expertise in member states and ways of making it available for other member states, somewhere in line with the example put forward by Karoline. Another very important field in terms of enhanced cooperation at EU level is the development of guidelines. So EASO has embarked, then again, together with the network, that's one of the very first tasks of the network, into the development of guidelines on standards and indicators for both material and non-material reception conditions. We have set up a working group with members appointed by the network. We have 8 member states actively involved, including Belgium and Austria, I should say. And together with the European Commission, with the Fundamental Rights Agency and UNHCR. It's very important as well to note that we will, of course, consult our consultative forum, and the consultative forum is the body in EASO bringing together civil society organizations interested in cooperating with the agency. And once we have a final agreement on those standards and indicators, and that would be the first time that we would reach such a goal at EU level, of course, such guidelines will be adopted by all member states in the EASO Management Board. On a very practical but extremely important issue as well, we have been developing training, of course, specific training on reception. It is very important to, of course, to note that joint training is key to come to more aligned reception conditions in the future. So we have developed a specific training module on reception conditions as part of our overall curriculum. And at this stage, and while the module itself has only been available for a few months, we have seen there again a very good response from member states, and we have already trained with the module officials in more than 6 member states, and we have increasing demands in this regard for reception staff to be trained with the European module. So that's something to follow up. In terms of the long-term perspective, trying to, if not looking into a crystal ball, but at least looking, have a broader perspective at least, it's very interesting to note, to take note of a communication issued by the Commission, the European Commission, last week on 6th of April, on the reform of the Common European Asylum System. Because this communication could very well be a turning point for the CEAS, for the Common European Asylum System. The Commission is proposing to transform the Asylum Procedures Directive and the Qualification Directive into regulations to have its even more of a binding nature, and also to revise the Reception Conditions Directive and key aspects of it. And of course, as a full overhaul of the Dublin system and Dublin regulation is envisaged. As part of this reform of the Common European Asylum System, the Commission is proposing a revision of the EASO regulation. And would this materialize, that would mean a stronger monitoring role for EASO in the future, and that would include monitoring of reception conditions at the national level. But also, of course, other areas of the CEAS. It's also extremely important to note that the reform of the Dublin regulation, the Dublin system, would have, of course, implications on the setup of national reception systems. Because should Dublin be reborn, if I may say, as a distribution mechanism of applicants throughout the EU, and should EASO take a role in the distribution of applicants between member states, this would lead even to a stronger imperative to reach harmonized reception conditions, of course. And in effect, that would also imply EU-wide pooling of reception capacity, because the reception capacity would become, of course, one of the key factors in distributing asylum seekers across the EU. And of course, as a centralized body with the experience in cooperation and operational support, EASO would be in a very good position to assist particular member states in adapting to those possible new setups. But of course, all this remains to be seen how member states will react to this communication. But in any case, there's a clear trend towards a increased cooperation and coordination of the reception work in the EU. So that would be it for now. Thank you, Hanne.
Thank you, Jamil. Thank you for giving us an overview of what EASO currently does and actually could do to support reception systems across the EU. We now turn to the Q&A part of this webinar, and I would just like to remind everyone listening in that you can use the Q&A function on your screen or email events@migrationpolicy.org or tweet your question to @migrationpolicy or #MPIDiscuss. We have a question here from the audience about the use of the private sector in providing reception. I would like to pass this on to Michael and to Karoline to respond to. The question is, what about the dilemma? Because on the one hand, it creates flexibility, and you've highlighted the fact that it creates potential buffer capacity, but also there's, of course, the concern, as was raised by the audience, about potential exploitation, extra costs, but also in terms of the quality that is provided.
Good afternoon. Well, the reason why we added the private sector, and it's not only the private sector, we launched a public tender to which all organizations could participate, private and non-private, like NGOs or other organizations. But the reason why we mainly did it was to open up the number of operators that were able to work for the agency. The reception agency is built in Belgium on centers run by the agency itself or by the Belgian Red Cross, which is a very small basis to create new reception capacity at a very high pace. So that was the reason why we opened up the market also to the private or other sector. Now, quality is being ensured by the tender. There is a contract, there is a tender in which very clearly is stated which are the quality, which is the quality we really demand, and there are good control procedures which are being put into place also. So in fact, I understand the question, but in practice we don't see the difference between a reception center run by a local municipality, by ourselves, by the Red Cross, or by a private company. You have a contract in which you state very clearly what you expect, for which price, and you need to have your control and your audit processes put into place to be able to respond quickly when you see something is going wrong. That's a little bit the answer.
Thank you, Michael. Karoline, do you want to come in and give your view from the Austrian experience?
Yes, thank you. Well, as I mentioned before, we had, especially on the federal level, the tender procedure done in 2012, and this was a public tender, of course, also open to all different operators from the private sector, from NGOs. So it also was for us a measure to see, okay, what can be done, and also to make very clear our ideas and our also quality standards that we want to have ensured in our centers. So I do think that especially through tender procedures, you can have a very detailed contract pointing out what points you want to have fulfilled, which standards you have to be ensured, which steps in the intake, for example, what quality, what type of social care you want to have. So in our experience, there was not so much the fear, or we didn't see the danger so much of losing quality. On the contrary, since we have our heads of the reception centers there on the site, we have some kind of constant monitoring in place and can make sure that all points and all standards of the contract are in place and fulfilled. In terms of costs, I would say it helped us being and keeping flexible, because in my experience, the more partners you have, the less clear structures you have, the more the discussion is open to cost efficiency and so on. So we have a clear and very strict corset, let's say, in terms of costs, and in my view, this tender helped us to keeping the balance between all three parts of the triangle in a very efficient and good way. On the other hand, of course, it could not be done for the whole system. Like Michael also mentioned, the goal should be to have as much stakeholders and partners on board as possible, especially when you have to face a large influx. But this was not so much a topic in our case, since our partners, the federal provinces, have very different partners than we do on a federal level. They do work very much with smaller private partners, for example, former hotels or NGOs. A lot of big part is done by NGOs. So this is kind of a division of also of the market in the case of Austria. Thank you for the time being.
Thank you, Karoline. We have time for another question. We also have received a few questions about the situation in Greece, of course, where the situation of reception, as we all know, is very suffering a lot, and there's a lot of problems there. Maybe I can revert this question to Jamil. Maybe considering the limited time we have, can you give us a brief answer to some of the steps that will be taken over the next weeks and months in order to address the situation there, also from the EU side?
Yes, well, obviously, reception is a huge concern given the mass influx faced by Greece and the Greek authorities. The reception system in Greece was quickly under an enormous strain, that's sure. So actually the European Commission has made available emergency funding for Greece, and basically there are several layers of intervention, but basically the EU funds have been mainly used by UNHCR in creating reception capacity through different means, with literally camps as means of first reception, but as well with specific programs with vouchers for hotels and specific accommodations for vulnerable applicants and, of course, for unaccompanied minors. We have been supporting the process. We have been deploying member state experts to support to not only capacity building, but also to support the Greek authorities in running the centers. For instance, in the hotspots in the Greek islands, we have experts in addressing reception needs of unaccompanied children arriving to the Greek islands. But of course, it's an extremely challenging situation, and lots still needs to be done before we reach a situation that would be considered acceptable. And we're not quite there yet, but that's one of the key priorities, of course, of all the actors involved, whether international or European and national, of course.
Thank you, Jamil, for addressing some of the next steps that will be taken in this very important situation. We also have questions in relation to the issue of political will. To what extent is there a situation where national attitudes towards refugees are actually maybe deteriorating, and to what extent actually that may lead to political unwillingness to further support and invest in refugee reception? Michael, if I can put this question to you. Thank you.
Well, it's not an easy one. Well, I think from let's say from Belgium side, the political will was always there to do what needed to be done, saying that people who arrived in Belgium and applied here for asylum should have had convenient shelter and the best possible shelter. At the same time, it was clear that we really wanted to invest also in a solution that went broader than the national frontiers of this country, and seek for a solution that was on an EU level. So I think Belgium, at this moment, is also a quite warm supporter for relocation and resettlement programs, more and more the last years, and in that sense, really also supporting the idea that everybody should take his fair share of the burden, if I can call it like that, without jeopardizing improvements to refugee reception in Belgium itself. I will leave it to that, Hanne.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Karoline, did you want to give a short comment on that as well from the Austrian perspective?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I try to keep really short. Well, from my Austrian point of view, I would say, of course, the topic of asylum and especially also reception is a very highly political one, since the public opinion is a very shifting one and a very diverse one from all sides of the political arena. But also in Austria, I would actually say, like Michael pointed out, for Belgium, the political will to accommodate those applicants who apply for asylum in Austria was always there. It was never questioned whether or not to provide adequate housing and other reception conditions. Of course, also for Austria, it is the case that we seek a broader solution. We try to find a European solution for this very, very challenging topic, but it was never questioned whether or not to deal with the situation in the most willing and reactive way, let's say.
Thank you, Karoline. We've now come to the end of the webinar. Michael, did you want to make any closing remarks?
Well, perhaps very briefly. I think all member states have to deal with big challenges to manage their reception system, and as Jamil stated, every country has organized it a little bit in a different way, but the common challenges are independently on how things are organized or who does it. And the big challenge is how to keep that triangle in balance. And now for the last years, this was merely a national challenge, where some pilots were done to see how collaboration could be improved by sharing best practices, reception networks, etc. pilots. And there are still huge challenges on the national level. If we look at Belgium, where 70% of the asylum seekers now are being recognized and can stay in the country, there are where the first inflow put huge pressure on the reception side. Now the pressure is there on the integration side, vocational training, education, housing side, and there puts a lot of pressure. So it stays a national challenge, but what is clear is that the last years, an important element has been added with a high influx of migrants and the supranational politic aspect of migration, where Schengen is under pressure, where migration is used for strategic political goals, borders are being closed, there's a high pressure on states, etc. And so, in a certain sense, these are incredible, interesting times where things are moving at a very rapid pace. The paper I wrote is already perhaps dated, and the paper someone will write tomorrow will within 2 weeks be dated because of the pace of the changes. But it's very interesting because new ideas are being implemented, new roles are being defined. As Jamil said, new roles are being developed for EASO, for Frontex, for the Commission, for the member states, and it's very difficult to predict if we're looking now at the embryo of a new organized migration management from the EU, or if we're looking at something else which we don't know yet. But it's very challenging. It's very interesting, and it seems to be important is to try to shift from the emergency phase to towards a more structural approach where there really is a central coordination that has a holistic approach that tries to align between all those different stakeholders, that tries to bridge between the political, the tactical, the operational level, where all the assets of the EU acquis are being brought together, where resettlement, relocation potentially are coming up at a larger scale, which gives, once again, then for the reception agencies, big opportunities to evolve toward a more organized and thus stable reception network, and a new network, and where you can add to that structural collaboration and cooperation between states. That's a sort of a bottom-up approach that can serve as where we can use examples like Austria and Slovakia. So. Thank you very much, Hanne and MPI, for organizing this all, because this is and this will remain for the next weeks and months and perhaps years a very hot topic. Thank you.
Yes, I think we couldn't agree more, Michael. Thank you very much for sketching the next challenges that await us all in relation to reception, and also sketching and actually emphasizing the potential that this also brings in terms of change and rethinking approaches that have been used so far. And I would also like to thank the audience for listening in and for sending your questions through, and we apologize if not all questions were answered. We've tried to address as many as possible within the given time. There are several resources available on our website, and we also want to signal to you that the audio from today's webinar will be available on our website. There as well you can find the related report that was written by Michael Kegels and which has inspired this particular webinar. I also wanted to signal to you that my colleague Paul Cluett and I have written a new commentary looking at children as the forgotten aspect of the EU-Turkey deal, which is also available on our website. And finally, I would encourage you all to check our webpage, Moving Europe Beyond the Crisis, with a new data tool that shows asylum applications by country in the EU and other interesting data. For any reporters on the call, if you would have any further questions, please contact Michelle Mittelstadt at mmittelstadt@migrationpolicy.org. Thank you very much, and looking forward to you joining in the next webinar. Thank you very much.